Good morning. Today we finish the book of Isaiah. Tomorrow morning we'll have worship at 9 o'clock in Sutton. And then on Monday we will begin looking at Jeremiah, combining tomorrow's and Monday's readings from Jeremiah. But as we look at these last two chapters of Isaiah today, as we ended yesterday, chapter 64, this was verse 12, the last verse. After all this, will you restrain yourself, O Lord? Will you keep silent and punish us so severely? And I talked about, people saying, where are you, God? They were wondering, did God abandon them? What's going on? Where are you, God? And then chapter 65 begins with God's answer to them. I was ready to be sought by those who did not ask. I was ready to be found by those who did not seek me. I said, here I am, to a nation that did not call. I held out my hands all day long to a rebellious people who walk in a way that's not good. So, the first few verses of chapter 65, the majority of chapter 65, is God responding to the people's wondering, where are you, God? And God says, I've been here all along. I've been right here, and I've been looking for you. I've been hoping that you would come back, and God says, I will remember their iniquities. Why? Because they worshipped idols, because they did things against what I told them to do, And in verse 8, as the wine is found in the cluster, they say, do not destroy it. The imagery of good wine, good grapes and bad grapes, and there will be this separation. And this is one of the things that the prophets speak about, and Jesus too speaks about the separation between the good and the evil, between the righteous and the unrighteous, between the believer and the non-believer. And we see that here again. There's a blessing for those that follow, and there's a curse for those that don't. He says, I will bring forth descendants from Jacob, my chosen shall inherit it. And so God is speaking of what he's going to do, of the restoration of the nation of Israel, the restoration of Jerusalem. And we've read that, time and time again, that God restores Jerusalem. He promises that restoration. And we know from history that, Israel was up and down, and for many years there was no nation of Israel. But reality-wise is we look at this as the New Jerusalem at the very end of time, as in the book of Revelation. I saw a new Jerusalem, a new heaven and a new earth, and God talks about that and the promise of salvation. In verse 12 of chapter 65, I will destine you to the sword, and all of you will bow to the slaughter, because when I called, you did not answer. When I spoke, you did not listen. You did evil in my sight and chose in what I did not delight. And then verse 13 starts with that word, therefore. Because all of this sinning has been happening, this is what's happening. My servants shall eat, but you'll be hungry. You'll drink, but you'll be thirsty. Nothing is going to satisfy you. And there are times, when you feel like a snack, or you feel like something, but absolutely nothing satisfies that urge. And God is saying that, without me in your life, without the hope and the promise of forgiveness, of salvation, of an eternity spent in heaven, you're going to be empty. You're going to be searching for more. And there's Fill My Cup, Lord, is a song. It's like the woman at the well. I've been searching for things that did not satisfy. And it's a beautiful song. And it's about the Samaritan woman at the well, and about how her lifestyle had been. And she was trying to find fulfillment in so many different things. But then she met Jesus. Therefore, her life was changed. She had been searching for the things that didn't satisfy. And this is what the Israelites, this is what people do. And, it always seems like we need just a little bit more. We're not quite content with what we've got. We got to have just a little bit more. We're always seeking. And God says, here I am. I have everything you need. Everything you need. And the New Jerusalem will be established, and it will, he says, verse 17, I'm about to create a new heaven and a new earth, and the former things will not be remembered or come to mind. Be glad and rejoice in what I'm creating. That there will be no more pain, no more sorrow, no more grieving, and all of those things that we read as well. And verse 19, he says, I will rejoice in Jerusalem and delight in my people. And there will be no more weeping there. No more cries of distress. And again, the only time that's going to happen is when we come to that place of eternity that we call heaven. And verse 25 is one that, gets quoted some, the wolf and the lamb will feed together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox. That things that have been at odds with each other will change, and there will be peace and harmony. And then for chapter 66, just some concluding words for us that way. And, thus says the Lord, heaven is my throne, earth is my footstool, all things my hand has made, so all these things are mine. God has made him. God is the creator. God is the one who has the final say. But he looks for those of us who are faithful, for those who believe, for those who listen. And then, there's verses 3 and in there it says, whoever slaughters an ox is like one who kills a human being. Whoever sacrifices a lamb is like one who breaks a dog neck. So it's comparing something good with something bad, and to slaughter an ox is like killing a human being. It's that just doesn't really make sense, in so many ways. And I don't know what more to say about that, but it's just, it's a reminder that God's ways aren't our ways, and that we don't follow what God would have us follow. And then again, verse 4, I will choose to mock them. They will bring upon them what they fear, because when I called, no one answered. And here's the prophet Isaiah. This is the end of the book of the prophet Isaiah, and it's coming back to the point of, I continue to call my people. I continue to send my prophet. I continue to encourage them and enlighten them, and they don't hear. They don't respond. They turn away, and they do evil in my sight. That's what he says. But they did evil in my sight, and they chose what did not please me. And then hear the word of the Lord. The word of the Lord is the separation of the righteous and the unrighteous. And that's kind of we're going to see a little bit more of talk about the restoration of Jerusalem. But then again, this chapter concludes with the separation of the righteous and the unrighteous. In verse 12, he says, I will extend prosperity to her like a river, and the wealth of nations like an overflowing stream. As a mother comforts her child, so I will comfort you. So again, this is talking about the restoration and the promise that God has for us. And so verse 17 says, those who sanctify and purify themselves to go into the garden follow the one in the center. Eating the flesh of pigs, vermin, and rodents shall come to an end. So this is the unrighteous. They try to sanctify themselves. They try to take care of themselves, but they sanctify themselves rather than having God do that for them. And God says, I know their works. I know their thoughts. I'm coming to gather people of all nations and tongues. And again, here is that promise that it's not only the Israelites. It's not only the Jews that God is coming for. God is coming for all people. And that's what Jesus says too. He says, I have sheep of another fold, of other folds that I must go and bring in. So Jesus is saying, that I can't just stay here in Galilee. I can't stay in Jerusalem. I can't stay in Nazareth. I can't stay because the world needs to hear God's word of grace. And in the very last verse, you would think that the ending verse of a prophet would be good, but the very last word that he's got, it talks about the eternal punishment. They will go out and look at dead bodies who have rebelled against me. The worm will not die, the fire will not be quenched. This is not a pretty picture. But this is what God says to his people. If you love me, if you follow me, if you hear my word, I will be gracious to you. I will forgive you. But if you're rebellious, I will separate the righteous from the unrighteous. So we have Jesus to make us righteous with God.